The morning sun filtered softly through the window, casting a warm glow across my quiet apartment. My name is David, and at 46 years old, I'd built a life that many would envy. I'm a corporate lawyer, successful, respected, known for my integrity and unshakable work ethic. For years, my life had been stable, predictable. I had a beautiful home, a thriving career, and a wife I believed I could rely on. Sarah was my college sweetheart. We'd been together for 12 years, 12 years of laughter, love, and the kind of partnership I thought would last a lifetime. She was my rock, my best friend. Together, we'd navigated the ups and downs, supporting each other through everything life threw our way. I had always believed that no matter what came our way, Sarah and I were in it together. But life, as it often does, has a way of turning everything upside down. Just as my career seemed to be reaching new heights, I was blindsided by a diagnosis I wasn't prepared for: cancer. It was a blow I couldn't have seen coming. As I struggled to hold on to my health, I didn't realize that something much more devastating was happening right under my nose. My wife, the one person I thought would never betray me, was about to do something I could never have imagined. The trust one had in her was about to be shattered in a way that would forever change my life. I had never expected to wake up to this. The morning had started like any other, me sitting at my desk in the small corner of the room where I'd been working through endless papers, but with the fatigue of chemotherapy weighing me down. I weakly stirred my tea, feeling the familiar ache in my bones, the nausea creeping in with every movement. I wasn't the man I once was. My once crisp suit now felt loose on my body, and my hands trembled slightly as I held the cup. As I glanced at the pile of papers on my desk, one envelope caught my attention. Its appearance wasn't anything out of the ordinary, just a plain white envelope, but it was the name on the return address that made my stomach drop. It was from Sarah's lawyer. At first, I didn't understand what it meant. I'd been living in a haze of hospital visits, treatments, and medications, just trying to stay strong, trying to keep my head above water. But when I opened the envelope, my hands froze and my heart seemed to stop. Divorce papers. The words blurred together on the page as I struggled to comprehend what I was reading. Divorce. My wife, the one person I thought I could count on, the person who had promised to stand by me, had filed for divorce. While I was fighting for my life. While I was weak. While I needed her the most. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt a deep, painful emptiness take root inside me. My vision blurred as tears threatened to spill, but I held them back. I couldn't let her see me break. Not like this. As I read through the papers, the reasons became clear. Sarah's words, though not directly to me, were loud and cold on the page. She felt neglected. She said she couldn't stand being in the background while I focused all my energy on my health and my career. She'd grown emotionally distant, feeling like she was left behind as I struggled with my diagnosis. She blamed my illness and the toll it took on my focus, as if I had any control over it. The cruel irony was that in her attempt to move on, she was erasing the very essence of the love we had shared. It wasn't just the divorce, it was the realization that, in her mind, I wasn't worth the fight anymore. That, somehow, she had found someone else to turn to. What hurt even more was the timing. She hadn't even given me a chance to process my illness, to deal with the fragility of life, before turning her back on me. Her emotional detachment had been brewing for some time, and I had been too consumed with my own battle to see it. She had already made up her mind. It wasn't just the divorce, it was the fact that she had been planning this for a while I was busy trying to survive. There was no confrontation, no attempt to talk it through. She had already checked out, and now the final blow was delivered through a cold, indifferent letter. The truth hit harder than any of the physical pain I'd been enduring. It wasn't just that Sarah was leaving, it was that she had abandoned me when I needed her most. The woman I thought would stand by my side, the one I had loved and trusted, had walked away without a second thought. It felt like being stabbed in the chest by someone I had loved so deeply. I had given everything to her, to us. I had built a life with her, shared my dreams, and worked tirelessly to give her the world. And in return, this was how she repaid me? By walking out the door just as my life was crumbling? It was a crushing blow. I couldn't confront her. I was too weak, too sick to fight back in the way I wanted to. I couldn't even muster the energy to scream or plead for her to stay. All I could do was stare at the papers in front of me, feeling a mix of disbelief and numbness. I wanted to confront her, to ask how she could do this to me, but in my fragile state, I knew it would only make me more vulnerable. I couldn't let her see how badly she had shattered me. I couldn't let her see that she had taken not just my health, but my heart, and left me alone to fight this battle. This wasn't just a divorce. It was the loss of everything I had believed in. The trust, the love, The promise that we would face whatever came our way together. Now I had nothing. As I sat there, staring at the divorce papers, a flood of emotions threatened to drown me. Anger, betrayal, hurt. But deep down, I knew that reacting impulsively, letting these emotions dictate my next move, would only make things worse. I wasn't the kind of person to lash out, especially not now. I had spent my whole life building a reputation for being steady, for being the calm one in the room. And even though my body was weak from the chemotherapy, my mind was still sharp, and I would not let this betrayal break me. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and focused on the steady rhythm of my breathing. The weight of the situation was heavy, but I wasn't going to crumble under it. I refused to let this moment define me. As much as it hurt, I couldn't let Sarah see how much she'd torn me apart. Instead of falling into despair or rushing into a confrontation, I gathered my thoughts and reminded myself of the man I had always been. The patient one, the one who didn't rush to judgment or act out of impulse. I could control this situation, I could control myself, and that was the only thing that mattered now. I had never been one to act in the heat of the moment. When the world demanded quick responses, I learned to step back and observe. I believed that time and calmness had a way of revealing the truth and exposing what needed to be done. I knew that if I allowed myself to react emotionally, I would be giving Sarah power over my life. But if I stayed calm, stayed composed, and took my time, I could turn this situation around on my terms. As much as I wanted to confront Sarah, to demand answers, I knew that wasn't going to give me the closure I was searching for. In fact, it would probably make everything worse. Anger would cloud my judgment, and I couldn't afford that. I needed to be smart about this. I needed to get the facts, understand everything fully, and then decide what my next step would be. No matter how much she had hurt me, I wasn't going to let it break me. My calmness, my ability to think clearly, was the one thing that I could control in a situation that had spun completely out of my hands. So I decided to take my time. There was no rush. This wasn't just about getting back at her, it was about finding a way forward, about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and, most importantly, my peace of mind. I knew that this wasn't a battle I could win with anger. I wasn't going to rush into a confrontation and make myself vulnerable. Instead, I took a step back and focused on what I could control, the facts. If Sarah was truly determined to end our marriage, I needed to make sure that I had everything I needed to protect myself, financially, emotionally, and legally. But I also needed to do it quietly without raising suspicion. First, I turned to her email. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but after years of trust, I had always had access to our shared accounts, and I needed to understand what had been happening behind my back. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I had to know. With shaky hands, I logged into her email, my heart racing as I scrolled through the messages. It didn't take long before I found what I was looking for, an email thread between Sarah and a colleague from her office, one that was filled with far more than just work-related chatter. It was clear they had been involved for months. The intimate language, the plans to meet in secret, the late-night exchanges, it was all there, laid bare in front of me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own wife had been having an affair while I was fighting for my life. The betrayal stung deeply, but I reminded myself that I wasn't reacting in anger. I was collecting evidence, building a case, and I couldn't afford to lose control now. Next, I turned my attention to our finances. Over the years, Sarah had always handled most of the household budget, and I trusted her to keep everything in order. But something had always felt off. With the stress of my illness, I hadn't been as involved in the details of our finances as I should have been. Now I needed answers. I reached out to our shared financial advisor, someone I trusted, and discreetly asked for a review of our accounts. I made sure to phrase the request carefully, explaining that I needed an update for my own peace of mind during my recovery. The advisor agreed to send me a breakdown of our recent transactions. When I went over the statements, I found several large withdrawals that didn't add up. Small amounts here and there, but over time they had accumulated. And as I dug deeper, I found evidence that Sarah had been siphoning money out of our joint accounts for months, redirecting it into a separate account I didn't know about. I had no idea what she had been planning, but it was clear that her intentions were far more than just ending our marriage. Each piece of evidence I gathered felt like another small weight being added to the pile, but I remained calm. I didn't want to confront her yet, not until I had everything. This wasn't about revenge, not for me. It was about ensuring I had the facts, irrefutable proof of her betrayal. If she thought she could walk away without consequences, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I'd worked for, everything I'd trusted, without understanding the full scope of her actions. And I wasn't going to allow myself to be taken advantage of in the process. I worked quietly, methodically over the next few weeks. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't need to act impulsively. I had learned long ago that the best way to handle a situation like this wasn't to react in anger. It was to be patient, to wait for the right moment, and to make sure I was prepared when it came time to act. Sarah may have thought she had already won, but the truth was I was just getting started. Weeks passed, and with each day my resolve only strengthened. I had collected all the evidence I needed. Sarah's betrayal was now undeniable. I wasn't going to let my emotions cloud my judgment or my response. After all, this wasn't about revenge or making her feel the pain I had experienced. It was about something far more important: control. I refused to let her see me break, and I certainly wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of an emotional outburst. What I needed now was a response that spoke louder than any tears or accusations ever could. A response that would show her the full weight of her actions, while maintaining the dignity I had always prided myself on. I sat down and began drafting the letter. It was carefully worded, precise, and deliberate. I wasn't going to engage in a back and forth of insults or angry accusations. There was no need for that. Instead, I laid out the facts: the affair with her colleague, the money she had been secretly siphoning from our accounts, the way she had been emotionally checked out while I fought for my life. I wasn't cruel in my words, but I made sure to expose her for what she had done. This was her betrayal, and it would not go unnoticed. The tone of the letter was dignified, cutting, and firm. I offered a dignified separation, acknowledging the end of our marriage, but I made sure she understood that this was not going to be as easy as she thought. There would be consequences. Not just for her actions, but for how she had treated me while I was vulnerable, for how she had taken advantage of a man who was fighting for his life. I wanted her to understand the weight of what she had done, but I wasn't going to lower myself to petty retaliation. I signed the letter, sealed it, and sent it off, knowing that this was the moment where everything would change. There was no going back after this. When Sarah received the letter, I knew she was expecting something else. She was probably waiting for me to beg or lash out, for some sign of desperation or heartbreak. She probably expected me to collapse emotionally, to show her how deeply she had wounded me. But that's not what she got. Instead, she received a calm, calculated response. One that wasn't filled with emotional pleas, but with hard facts and a quiet authority. When she read the letter, I imagine the shock was evident. This wasn't the man she thought she had left behind, the man who might be shattered by her betrayal. No, I had held my ground, and now she was forced to face the weight of her actions, not just as an affair or a betrayal, but as a calculated, selfish choice that had consequences. I wasn't asking for her to apologize or to fix anything. I wasn't asking for her to come back. What I wanted was for her to understand the full scope of her betrayal, and I had made sure she could not escape it. The silence in my response spoke volumes. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg for her to stay. I had done the work. Now it was her turn to realize what she had done, and how she had left behind a man who, though wounded, was still standing tall. For Sarah, that moment of realization must have been heavy. She had thought she could walk away without facing any consequences, but now the truth was staring her in the face, and she had to confront the full extent of what she had lost. Not just a marriage, but trust, respect, and dignity. The weight of that must have hit her hard, but for me, the moment of clarity was one I had been waiting for. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was free. And now I was in control. The consequences for Sarah were not immediate, but I knew they would come. The letter I sent her had been deliberate, and while she likely hadn't expected such a calm response, she could no longer ignore the facts I had laid out for her. In her mind, she may have thought that walking away would be simple, that I would simply fade away into the background, a casualty of her selfishness. But the reality was, her actions had consequences, and those consequences would not be swept under the rug so easily. As the weeks went by, Sarah had to deal with the fallout of her choices. I knew she expected the process to go smoothly, that she would get her divorce and move on. But now, with the full extent of her betrayal exposed, she was forced to confront the repercussions. I didn't want to destroy her, but I was going to ensure that my side of the story was heard, that the truth could not be ignored. I worked closely with my legal team to secure the best possible outcome in the divorce proceedings. I knew this wasn't just about splitting assets. It was about protecting my dignity and ensuring that her deceit didn't affect my career or my future. We made sure that the terms of the divorce reflected not only our shared assets but also the emotional damage she had caused. I didn't want revenge. Revenge would have been petty and impulsive. Instead, I sought justice, a fair resolution that would allow me to move on without the shadow of her betrayal hanging over me. My focus remained clear: self-preservation and reclaiming control over the life that had been threatened. In the midst of the legal process, I took time to focus on something that had long been neglected: myself. The cancer had already put so many aspects of my life on hold, but now I realized that I needed to take control of the one thing that I could: my health and my future. While Sarah had turned her back on me during one of the hardest battles of my life, I was determined not to let her betrayal define me. Instead of sinking into despair or anger, I chose this as my opportunity for personal growth. I refocused my energy on recovery, slowly regaining the strength I had lost in the face of chemotherapy. It wasn't easy, but each day brought me a little closer to the man I had once been, and even further than that. I wasn't just fighting cancer anymore. I was fighting for a future that didn't include the shadows of betrayal. The emotional weight of my marriage had held me down for too long, and with each passing day I began to rebuild, not just physically but mentally and emotionally as well. In terms of my career, I chose not to let Sarah's betrayal take away my focus. My reputation as a corporate lawyer had always been one of unwavering commitment, and now I had a new sense of clarity. I poured my energy into my work, securing cases with a newfound determination, knowing that my personal life was no longer a distraction. I wasn't just fighting to survive, I was fighting to thrive. I wanted to prove to myself that I was stronger than this setback, that no matter what, I could rise above. The end of my marriage marked the beginning of a rebirth. I began to see that this betrayal, while painful, had allowed me the chance to reclaim myself. I wasn't the man Sarah had known. I was someone new, someone stronger, more resilient, and fully in control of my life. Cancer had not beaten me. Divorce had not defeated me. In fact, it had ignited a fire within me, one that would push me forward, unapologetically, into a future that I would build on my terms. This journey has taught me more than I could have imagined. Through everything, the cancer, the betrayal, the heartbreak, I've come to realize the value of patience. Life throws curveballs at you, but the real strength lies in how you respond. In the face of betrayal, it's easy to want to lash out, to make your pain known. But sometimes, the most powerful response is the quiet one, the one that doesn't seek vengeance but strategy. I've learned that holding on to your dignity, even when it feels like it's been ripped away, is the key to moving forward. I spent so much of my life thinking that strength was about pushing through, about being loud and forceful. But now I know that true strength comes from within. It's about standing tall even when you're knocked down. It's about taking control of your life, even when someone tries to take it from you. In the end, I found a strength I didn't know I had, and it's helped me rebuild not just my career but my very soul. True strength is found in your calmest response. Have you ever faced a betrayal that changed your life? Share your experiences in the comments below and subscribe for more stories of strength and resilience.